let's start up our workshop. So the first thing we're doing is the workshop, which is preparatory to the formal council meeting, which will follow immediately after this. And so let's start up. And I see everyone except Molly here, and I think
Molly's excused.
And on holiday, on vacation, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay.
And you have your, we have Nick Ward-Willis on, and John Clark, our planner.
Okay, thank you. So first one is from Mark Price, and it's about community facility. That's about the survey. You want to talk to us, Mark?
And Mayor, I asked Mark to just give us a quick update on summer hoops for 2 minutes before he jumps into that. So okay. Mark, if you do that as well.
And then T-shirts after that, right?
Don't we like T-shirts?
And mugs, hats.
Good evening, everyone. I just wanted to take a minute to acknowledge and thank all the folks involved with our summer basketball program, Beacon Hoops. We ran another successful season this year, and they had their championships last week, so I just wanted to take a minute to thank and acknowledge the following. So for this year, and just so you know, it's a program that runs for about 8 weeks in the summer. They play 4 nights a week at South Avenue Park and Riverfront Park, and kids from the age of 5 to 18 play in different divisions. So our championships this year were held last week, and the champions for the rookie division were the Team Hart Realty team. The junior division was the Peace World team, and the seniors division, Carter's Restaurant. So congratulations to all those winners. I want to thank especially the following volunteers for all their hard work this summer. It is a program that's run entirely by volunteers. We underwrite the costs for it, but it's the volunteers that make this happen. So I want to thank Christina Riccatelli, Maritza Anderson, Berkeley Lunsford, and Wayne Griffin for sort of steering the ship again this year. To the coaches and volunteers, coach volunteers and sponsors. For Coach John Cooper with the VFW Post 666 team, Ruben Simmons with the I Am Beacon team, Kevin Peggram with the Ladies Auxiliary of St. Rocco's team, Omar Harper with the Team Hart team, Mike Mojica with the St. Della Rosa team, Dominic Riccatelli with the Key Food team, Troy Whited with the A Sika Heals Foundation team, Jamae Griffin with the Peace World team, Kwasi Garris with the Twins Barbershop team, Mickey Segura with the Baja 328 team, TJ Reed with the Carter's Restaurant team, and Matt Saccone with the Sal's Pizza team. Thank you everyone that was involved, and congratulations, kid, for another successful year. Just for everyone's information, on Saturday 8/20 at the South Avenue Park, beginning at 11 a.m. during the back to school block party, we'll be hosting all-star games for all the kids that were exceptional in this summer's season. So again, thank you, Beacon Hoops, and hope to see everyone next summer.
And we're recruiting for the Dummy Light team for next year.
And we have, moving on to the survey, I circulated to you guys a preliminary draft of what we feel is, a pretty thorough survey. It was broke down into, 4 categories: current facilities, current programs, future facilities and programs, and lastly, sort of communication and demographics. And I feel we asked some very basic questions and allowed opportunity for comment, deeper than that. So I encourage everyone, to give me your thoughts or comments on it. Just so you know, the paper version is, I also included a link in what I circulated, so you got a sense of what it's going to look like online, because I printed out the paper version and it was like 19 pages long. So it doesn't format to paper. Eventually, if we end up doing paper versions as well, we'll make sure that's in a much cleaner version of than what I circulated to you. But I just wanted to get that information to you so you could see what we're thinking about once we launch.
And then I saw a version of this and provided some feedback. I assume you got all that, right?
Yep.
Okay. Yeah, I'm just trying to make sure that we use that survey, that we can get to, actionable conclusions from it, right? Which is really hard in a survey. It's never fully possible, but those were the suggestions to kind of help us steer in that direction.
And we did a pretty good revision from, the consultants are here tonight. I told them we didn't need them, at this point, but we did the first pass at it. It took me a few minutes to get it sort of organized the way we have it now, because it felt a little scattered to start. It was very thorough, but it bounced around from, facility to program to future to past. So I really tried to get it into what we have now, programs and facilities, and then opportunity to sort of, categorize and sort of prioritize, future goals or hopes, and also places to type in, because I think a lot of the good feedback is going to come from, not just standard questions. I think we can parse a lot from people's thoughts, hopefully.
I understand there was a sort of focus group meeting that happened maybe a month ago. I'm just curious how that went and if that informed at all the survey questions that we ended up with.
Yeah, we ran 3 focus group meetings. I had circulated an email to about 100 people in sort of, the recreation realm in Beacon. We had pretty good attendance, They passed by them a lot of the questions in sort of a draft format, so they kind of asked them questions that they thought they would be asking the community, and there was feedback from them. I wasn't very understanding of the process, but after I saw after I sat in on one of the meetings and saw the draft, I could see they were sort of making sure they were sort of headed down the right road per se. So I think folks gave us some decent feedback.
The ward map is the old ward map. Ben can get you the new one.
But is still accurate for another year and a half.
Oh, that's right. Oh, you're right. Let's leave it then. Yeah, leave it. That'll work.
Do you want feedback tonight? I only have a couple things.
Sure.
Do you want to do it, go around, or do you want to do it in order, or how would you like to-
However, I have a pen, so.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Oh.
That was pulling a lot.
Okay.
I'm very serious.
So I don't think it'll affect the outcome of the questions, but the first question reads that a facility is a place, a park, pool, etc. And then in the first question, parks and facilities are separate in the question, though a park is defined as a facility in the sentence before. So it just read kind of funny, because I was reading the definition of a facility, and I was like, oh, a facility includes a park. That's interesting. And then the next question said, parks, facilities, trails. But the real, I think the real feedback to give on this one is, I'm concerned that people might not concerned, but I wonder whether people will know which parks and facilities are City of Beacon ones and may self-edit. Because they don't know the status of a property. So for example, someone may be interested in, they want to put down Hidden Brook, but then they might be like, oh, well, is that city? I don't know, maybe I shouldn't put that in here, or, I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
I don't
University
know.
Settlement might be another one. But.
Yeah, I don't know if there's a way to keep that language open. I would be much more interested in hearing what people think of facilities, whether or not they're city-owned properties, and, we can only do what we can for the city-owned ones, but maybe the framing can be such that it actually encourages people to not self-edit on that if they don't know if it's a city.
Yeah, I was going to suggest replacing City of Beacon with public, because then if something's county-owned or state-owned or whatever some of these curious statuses are, it wouldn't be ruled out.
And did we have the complementary, or the inventory to complement, the survey? So my hope is, in addition to the survey release, we'll make sure there's at least a link or something to that inventory, so folks can see the scope of what, public property and city-owned properties are here in Beacon.
But like, people may not know that Scenic Hudson owns Long Dock, right? And they might think, wow, we need another boathouse or something, whatever. Put X in there.
Good place.
It'd be good to know, though.
The map and identifying them physically on the map would be really cool.
As a response from survey takers, you mean?
No, if we're going to
No, as
put them on.
As background information.
Right? That'd be great. And I like the idea of the resources, right? Because, Yeah, we maintain Long Dock. Madam Brett, we maintain.
Yes.
I don't think we maintain Long Dock.
No.
No.
But yeah, I think listing all of the available public resources is a really good one.
Yeah, good.
Was that it for your feedback, Dan?
No, I don't know. Do I do all of my feedback now, or do we go to question 2?
What kind of a question was that?
I have one other thing. Let me just.
Okay.
Later on, there's a question about who the community center should be for, and it identifies some different groups. And I guess I was wondering what the purpose of that, if we're asking already what types of facilities and programs we need, and what types of programs we need, wouldn't the programming drive the audience? So asking people who they think the community center should be for seems like it's getting at the same thing, but just kind of vaguer or more indirect, you know? It's like, what are people's opinions of who else should?
Is that the question 20? Do you know?
Yeah, let me go down.
I think it says which age groups best served
That's
by the
right, yep.
community center. Pick 2.
Yeah, what was the thinking behind that?
I think their hope in that was to start to quantify the community thoughts on who it should serve. I mean,
Mhm.
that's what I get from interpreting, pick two categories. So maybe it's a prioritizing of what the facility should be for, but I can absolutely appreciate.
I'm certainly not suggesting taking it out. I was just curious why it was that way. Yeah.
Yeah, I wonder if, I'm leaning towards taking it out because I think
The pick 2, right?
Yeah. Question 20, it's helpful information, but like you're sort of implying a more broad question about which demographics, or like a more accessible word than demographics, would be best served by a community center, to keep it more broad, not just age-based. I had one small thing on page, they're not numbered, but right under the ward map, it asks people to indicate their gender. I think that we should include non-binary and also just simply other, so people can self-define themselves. It's number 31.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Ready? Okay. I mean, I think what inspired this study that we're going to do was, in part, was the desire for, or the discussion about a community center. And I feel like it's kind of buried so deep into the questionnaire that I think I would have preferred it almost to be up closer to the top. So it kind of sets the tone of a more, traditional facilities and programming that we have, with all the questions prior to it. So I think maybe to get it out there and sort of provoke a response, I would have preferred it be further toward the top of the questionnaire.
Would potentially revising the introduction,
That would be a big help, yeah.
just to sort of speak to that?
Yeah, because I'd really like to inspire people's responses and kind of thinking outside the traditional concept of recreation and what, they could imagine a facility under one roof might accomplish that we don't already have here in Beacon.
Great point.
Yeah, I would take the intro and get rid of most of the words, and actually tell them what you're going to be asking them. In other words, we're going to ask first about facilities, which are things like, and then we're going to ask about programs, and then we're going to ask about, we can kind of get it in there. So right up front, you're saying, here's the stuff we're going to ask you about. I actually think you put the map right up front too, and you list the public facilities so people can see these are our existing facilities, and we're going to be asking you questions about that. Right, and then when you get to, what ward do you live in, then you just say refer back up to the map at the front, right? Because I think that structures it, which I think is what you're saying too.
Yeah.
That it's just burying it. Right?
Yeah, I think it's kind of, people might look at this questionnaire right now and think in purely traditional terms, and I think we've done a study similar to this, besides the community center questions, not too long ago.
Yeah, your recreation fee study had some of this.
Yeah. So I think
And we've had to reiterate to the consultant several times that that's not to be buried. It was the primary mission here.
Yeah. So I'd like to and I can't, I don't have the ability now, but just to really inspire people to respond to this and really kind of think of what we could use.
No, I think a much stronger introduction based on sort of what, speak to folks, again, we want you to give us what you use now and where you go now, and the hope of this whole thing is to come up with.
I mean, I might even say during that is that the pandemic has taught us some valuable lessons and and sort of weaknesses in, our ability as a community to help one another. And, so like under, I think it was 22, when you have such as it might include a community kitchen, food distribution location, computer lab, something like that,
And I think maybe we say up front that the impetus for this study was a proposal to build a community center, and that we better wanted to understand what that community center is. And by looking at what we have in terms of existing programs and existing facilities, we're trying to figure out what's missing and what would go into that center.
Exactly. And I think that,
So like frame it that way, like we're trying to assess what we have, and then but the primary function of this is to identify what need and what use a community center would have.
Yeah, I mean, I
we'll
feel we're trying to
bring it back.
prep folks just before taking this, so when they step to the questions, and there's an opportunity to type things or think outside of the box, that's what I want to, get out of them. So I think, yes, I did, in talking right now, I think there's a way better way to do this introduction as a sort of park pep rally / give them the drive, so when you open it, you understand where we're hoping to head with it. So
yeah, exactly.
Yeah, but I'm sorry. Go ahead. Just say you just have to be careful. We have to list the West Center Street facility. We have to call it something, and we call it what? The
Community center.
Rec center now.
Yeah, I know. So there's some phrasing to kind of work in. These are our existing facilities, including this one. I don't know. You have to figure out how to do that, right? So.
And something that I've heard us talk about in general, that it's a recreation needs, but it's also the potential vision for the community centers, that it also houses social services. And I'd like that spelled out a little bit more clearly. Since we're focusing on the intro language, maybe that's the place to put it.
Yep, I've tried to scrub recreation from most of the survey and try to get back to that community facility and program. That sort of, to me, is the base language I'd like to see. So, which include social services, recreation, community service.
Maybe community services instead of social services, because I think there is an implication about social services that's not always positive.
But I think also part of the purpose of this is to destigmatize those social services. The idea that you could go to get your WIC checks at the same place that your kid goes to their after-school care, I think is part of the purpose of having this all in one facility. Not that the city would administrate these, state and federal programs, but that they could be housed in the same place for the sake of convenience.
I think social service, my problem with social services is that the word sounds narrow. You know, that it sounds like, you know, some kind of family support or mental health support. So community and social services, I think, would cover everything.
I have one more question, which is if anyone has timed how long it takes to take this survey. I think we should try and keep it relatively short. I don't know what, I'm sure the consultants have a recommendation for how long like, an optimal amount of time is. But it does feel fairly long, and we want it to also be accessible.
The, and sort of after this stop, the next stop with them is to get a complete, because the only thing I have is a proof copy of the digital format. So once we get a little closer here, I'm going to ask them to give me that, and I'm going to have several people sit down and sort of click through it so we have it. Because even out on the front side, it's nice to let folks know we need 10 minutes of your time, or, you know, if you have 20 minutes, please, I don't, when you print it out on paper, it was like, egad, here's a document to fill out,
Here's your term paper.
That also reminds me, are we doing any sort of incentives for people to fill this out? I don't know.
Like a
gift card,
T-shirt, maybe?
A T-shirt, a gift card, free tuition to summer camp. No, that would be a lot, but.
We have a whole smattering of dummy light memorabilia. I had started thinking a little bit of that. There's some preliminary thoughts on some, at least, sort of prizes, or
even if it was just sort of a raffle based, if you fill it out,
Yeah.
you're entered to win.
Yes.
Are we allowed to do that?
I'll have to check into that. I, at the very least, was thinking about your favorite park sticker
Nick,
with the
Nick
QR
is
code.
on. Nick, are we allowed to do a raffle?
Not a raffle, but some of the other items Mark has spoken about. So I'll speak with Mark offline, and we can develop something that will implement the council's intent to give the people incentive to answer the survey.
We'll send Mark over to wash their cars or their bicycle or something. Pool pass.
What exactly is the purpose of question 7? I was trying to wrap my head around.
7?
Yeah, rating the existing community facilities needs. Like, I guess, is it to then further invest in a specific, it's like if there's a lot of interest in playgrounds, to invest more in playgrounds, or if there's not a lot of interest in, I don't know, community gardens, stop doing community gardens. I was just trying to understand like what the purpose of question 7 is in this particular survey.
Yeah, I mean, in a format like this, I think it's a mapping, you know what I mean? If over 1,500 surveys, they're allowed, they start to get a sense of the importance of athletic courts, or they find that playgrounds are the number one thing folks are very interested in having in their parks, is the general idea, I believe, with that question. I think it takes quantity to start to map it out from there, was my understanding of, sort of questions with multiple categories and prioritizing it.
Sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, okay. And then I guess another question would be, sorry, can you hear me? I think for question 14, there should be an NA, or sorry, not question 14. Come back to me. Dan, go ahead.
Okay. Under question 24, I just thought of this. Something I hear from people a lot about is the lack of performing arts space indoors and outdoors in Beacon. And so I'm wondering under question 24 if we could include performing arts space.
Mm-hmm.
That's a very common one I hear, actually. We have a lot of musicians and theater people in town with no place to go. It's listed under programs, music and art in the parks, is all I see.
Sorry, I think question 6 should have an NA option. It's in your experience in requesting availability when requesting to use facilities. I mean, I imagine we're trying to reach as many people with the survey as possible, and I imagine only a small percentage of the city is actually requested to reserve any given facility, but don't want them to get stuck on the 6th question.
So add a non-applicable?
Yes.
Yeah.
Or delete the question. Didn't we stop allowing reservation of pavilions?
Yeah, and since COVID, we've kind of did a first come, first serve, unless it's of a certain size. And
Okay.
but yeah, I don't know if it's necessarily.
But let's think about that one again.
I guess I think in the section I just caught up in general with like, what do you mean by facilities? And I think it would really be helpful if there was just like a list of what you meant, because I read the definition at the beginning, and then which it describes it as the park, pool, athletic field, etc. And then it breaks that up in later questions, and so I got confused when I was going through it.
I mean, 6 is very broad in comparison to some of the other questions, and if we're gonna, I think if you're going to do 6, to your point, it's got to be much more detailed, or non-existent.
Yeah, it ends up reading as sort of like a, how is our customer service question, which isn't necessarily the focus of this survey.
I'll see if there's a rework that makes it, or just to Chris's point, we just delete it in general. I feel like there's an easier way to ask if somebody was looking to do something and couldn't find a space to do it. What was that thing in space, versus, how were you able to ask and get it, type
Predetermining
thing.
yeah.
Mark, what's our go live date?
Pretty much this is the last stop, so we can, sort of tune it up, and then pretty much I talk to consultants and see very soon,
I'll announce later, there's a Ward 3 public meeting for September 17th. So if there's anything I can do by way of just, bringing some printouts and handing them out, I'll stop by you.
Very much want it to be up before Labor Day, so.
Okay.
Before Labor Day.
Yeah. And I'd like to be able to roll into the school year with it sort of in tow and in hand, and and actually, we're a little behind on our schedule, but it's actually pretty good timing because it's the end of summer, so we have several weeks to the end of summer and right into the school year, so I think we can circulate.
And do physical copies help, or do you prefer everyone to go?
I'm going to check if they can reformat this to look much better than a 9-page, double-page document, then I think, and we're working on now sort of the assisted tablet volunteer, sort of idea as well, so sort of go out there and if they have 10 minutes, we'll take the survey for them type thing.
I'll check in with you a week before.
Yeah.
2 more things, real quick. For 38, if we could maybe change in the race and ethnicity Asian Indian to South Asian, I think that encompasses a more broader, maybe politically correct that region, and then or ethnicity. And for 39, if we could maybe include American Sign Language in what's spoken in the household, because we do have a significant, or at least what I would consider a significant deaf population for our population size. And I think it would be good to get that info if we're asking this question at all.
Yep. And just 38 again was under Asian, Indian, and Pacific Islander.
Change Asian Indian to South Asian?
I'm sorry.
Change Asian Indian to
Asian.
South Asian.
South Asian. Perfect. Thank you.
I think also if other could be fill-inable, so it's not just other, but you could describe.
And I didn't check, but I believe the demographic section is supposed to be, not the rest of the questions we're hoping for fill-in, but the demographics we're hoping to get the data, but it isn't mandatory to take the survey.
Okay, we good?
Yeah, thank you for all of your work on this.
Yep, I appreciate the help with this. So yeah, we'll fine tune this and if you guys are okay with it, we'll get it up into its, sort of releasable format and hit the pavement.
Great.
Yep, and, obviously, under the city administrator, you have license to, like, make our comments make sense and fit together.
First, I have to make my comments make sense, and then it'll all come together.
There we go.
Great.
Thanks, Mark.
Thank you.
That's
Thank
a
you.
leap of faith, Lee.
All right,
Thank you, Mark.
Do you leave this on?
Yeah,
So-
you can leave that on. Thanks, Mark.
we got a couple of items, and I think, Nick, you're
Yeah,
going to
Mayor, the
introduce
next
them?
3 items Nick will introduce and kind of lead, and
Okay.
John is here for questions. And Nick, are you with us?
I am, great. Thank you. You should be able to hear me. Good evening.
Yep.
So the first matter is a proposed land use development project. The applicant is proposing to construct a multi-use building with a total of 30,000 square feet of first floor artist studios and 28 block apartments on the second floor and 95 parking spaces. The proposed project is on a 3.5 acre vacant parcel of land located in the Fishkill Creek Development District and within the Historic District and Landmark Overlay Zone. It's within the larger IFLOPS project on Fishkill Avenue along the Fishkill Creek, and there's an existing greenway trail on the property. This application was before you in your first meeting in July, just for your initial review. At that time, you were pleased with the concept plan and were ready for the next step, which was for the applicant to submit a formal proposal, and that's what you have before you tonight, is a project narrative, the application forms, the site development and site plan, which you've seen before, the existing condition survey, which you've seen before, the building plans that you've seen before, and there's a full environmental assessment form that the applicant has filled out, as well as renderings of the exterior of the building. And as this is in the Fishkill Creek District, it gets concept plan approval from the City Council. It does have to go through secret. At your July meeting, the council agreed that the planning board should be the lead agency. So what we're here to discuss tonight at the voting meeting is the procedural step of just referring the application to the planning board for their report and recommendation with respect to the concept plan. And remember, once the City Council grants a concept plan, the project goes to the planning board for site plan approval and the special permit to obtain a more detailed review of the grading, of the landscaping, of the parking, and items of that nature. And what's nice about this bifurcated process is because the planning board is doing the secret process, you will have the benefit of some of that review and comments on traffic and the Fishkill Creek and flooding early on, because those are all elements that the planning board has to review during the secret process. So the steps is that the City Council tonight will consider a resolution to refer to the planning board. Planning board will review the concept plan. Planning board will issue a secret determination. It's an unlisted action. They'll either issue a positive declaration, which requires the preparation of environmental impact statement, or a negative declaration finding that the project, along with proposed improvements to the project, would mitigate any significant adverse environmental impacts. Once they've made the secret determination, it comes back to the City Council for a public hearing on the concept plan. And after consideration of the concept plan and it gets granted, it then goes back to the planning board for the formal site plan approval. And in your memo, in your packet is also a memo from the city planner that really repeats a lot of what I've just provided you with over to you. So on for tonight is just a consideration of referring the project to the planning board.
If we chose to, if we didn't refer it to the planning board, we would do the CEQA review?
Well, no, it still needs to, there are two things going to the planning board. Well, one is mandatory. The concept plan needs to have a report and recommendation from the planning board before you schedule your public hearing. The second item is the planning board being the secret lead agency. The city council could be the lead agency, but the planning board also has that right to determine they wish to be the lead agency. So if the city council wanted to be lead agency, then you would have to circulate your notice of intent to be lead agency. Planning board would have an opportunity to object or agree. Or if, as you discussed the last meeting, the city council wants the planning board to be the lead agency, then we've indicated when we transmit the application that they would be the lead agency. They would provide you with the secret determination.
What happens if they object?
If they object, well, they're unlikely to object to taking the lead agency. That's the role they play, and they typically do that. The question becomes, if the city council said, we want to be lead agency, planning board then raises their hand and says, no, we want to be lead agency, then it goes to the DEC for a determination as to who should be the lead agency. And that rarely happens. More often than not, land use boards who have the experience and the expertise and the time on their agendas typically handle the secret review. But you have that right to do so if you wish to do so.
So maybe you can help me with this, Nick. So the thing that stuck out to me in the application that we got was that there's an endangered species on the property, the Indiana bat. And there's no other mention of the Indiana bat other than we're going to build 30,000 square feet in its habitat without saying what we're going to do to help the Indiana bat, move the Indiana bat, or do anything else for it. So is that common, that we just put in an application, yeah, there's an endangered species on there, and let's move along? I mean, it seems like...
Well, it is down in particular to the Indiana bat. The Indiana bat is fairly well regulated and controlled by DEC, who has regulations that prohibit the cutting of trees. The Indiana bat is plentiful, where the concern is to make sure you don't disturb their nesting areas. So DEC has very specific regulations that prohibit you from cutting trees down from the period, I believe it's March 31st until October 1st. I might be off by a month, but it's that general time period. And so no tree removal permits would be able to be issued during that time period.
And when the bats come back? Because they always go to the same tree.
The Indiana bats are endangered in this region. They're not listed as endangered or found on this site necessarily. Every DEC form comes back with Indiana bat as an endangered species on every application. And you just have to do a survey of the trees and moderate where you're going to cut. This site is basically treeless. So I find it is probably not an area where Indian bats are a problem here.
I've had this on every project I've built.
Mm-hmm.
Like on the Ashokan Rail Trail, I had to take down 2,700 trees.
Mm-hmm.
And we had to do it, there's a window in which you can take the trees down and then you have to stop.
Mm-hmm.
So as long as you abide by that window, they find other places to roost.
Mm-hmm.
You just don't want to take the tree down when they're nesting in the tree. And in this case, this is all open. And we had another bat too. There's two that are often on this environmental mapper.
Anything else on referring the conceptual plan over to the planning board and also asking them to do the seeker?
So I'm new at this, Lee. So this might be something that the planning board is, well on top of. But as far as the water district goes, on page 5, I see the project side is not on the existing district, and expansion of the district is needed, and new lines to serve the project site. So it's just a general question to sort of describe what this means, but if this isn't the time to describe what this means, if this is just a procedural step where we, refer this to the planning board and they'll talk about that, that is fine. It just stuck out to me as curious.
I'm sorry.
So during the planning board process, they do review the utilities, water and sewer, the availability of. They have to make sure that there is sufficient capacity, and also where the public lines will enter into the property, who's responsible for maintaining the lines, are pump stations required if there's grade issues, and that's all reviewed by the consulting engineer of the planning board during the site plan process.
Thank you, Nick. The pump house was another concern I brought up at the prior site plan. So that's great. And then the other question, which is kind of general, is how the comprehensive plan, how we use the comprehensive plan in matters like, I think that the water line and the wetlands are something, regulated by the Army Corps of Engineers and DEC, but that there's another recommendation, I believe, from the comprehensive plan that recommends 500 feet from the water line. And again, Nick, just a question is, maybe now's not the time, and maybe the planning board reviews all of this, but I'm interested in how recommendations from the very hardworking volunteers who created the comprehensive plan feed into now this process at this time.
So the recommendations of the comprehensive plan are for the legislative body to take into consideration when drafting legislation. And all zoning is deemed to be consistent with the comprehensive plan. So if or needs to be consistent with the comprehensive plan. So if the council wishes to look into those areas, it would review the comprehensive plan itself. There's a recommendation to do X, Y, Z. The planning board is left to work within the existing legislative framework. So if it's in the comprehensive plan, it's merely advisory to the planning board because the planning board is bound by what's in the code. And John Clark, in his review memorandum, has made some comments with respect to regulatory floodway, the surface water, steep slopes on the property, the 100-year floodplain, all how that needs to be addressed by the planning board. So the planning board does look at that, but to the extent there's any language in the comprehensive plan that is different from what is in your existing code, the planning board does not have that authority until it becomes legislation to then enforce what's in your comprehensive plan.
But
I don't know if there are any differences between the two.
Yeah, I think the current zoning for this district was based specifically on the comprehensive plan.
Right.
So I'm confident that it reflects the wishes and desires of the community at that point. So
Yeah, in fact,
we spent a lot of time working on this relative to the comprehensive plan.
yeah, if we're doing zoning that's contrary to the comprehensive plan, we have to alter the comprehensive plan and then do the zoning. Right? So yeah, I think generally speaking, it should be consistent. And John's out there.
And you also
can
have the
confirm?
architect here in case you have questions that have come up.
Okay.
REA, could a message be passed on to the landscape architects that when the trees are planted, that they research which trees are favorable to the Indiana bat, please?
Yeah, I was going to say that we're actually going to be adding more trees than any kind of removal, so probably in the long run it'll be beneficial, but yeah, we'll look at that.
Thanks.
I was really glad to see that there was consideration for the pedestrian and the bicycle traffic, because I think, more demand on the Groveville Bridge will mean more pedestrian, questionable pedestrian safety along Liberty Street, which is already, an issue. And they're one-bedroom lofts, so it's not necessarily going to be on the way to school traffic, but I do see bikes and runners more and more coming from, I guess that would be north to south, using that bridge to get onto the the trails, Fishkill Ridge and Mount Beacon trails. So thank you for considering that.
Okay. Anything else?
Oh, one more question.
Of course.
Will we round up to 3 affordable units? It's 2.8, just curious.
Oh, yeah, that always rounds up.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah.
Okay. Everybody good? I have one. I'm sure you know the answer to this. So the entrance into this area from Route 52 is a private road?
Yes, that's a private road owned by the neighboring property owner, and then there's an easement over that.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Does your easement give you the ability to force them to improve that road?
Unfortunately not.
Okay.
I know that there's been a lot of talk with them back and forth, but there was never any mechanism to force them to do that.
Okay. I just want to make clear it's not our road.
Yeah.
We've heard about the condition of the road, but I can't send anybody in to fix it.
Right, so that's Lydia Drive,
Mill.
Yeah.
those streets?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the planning board also, when we got the original project reviewed, they also made an effort to get that to happen, but there was just no mechanism of enforcement there.
Okay.
So
Just-
all those houses are part of one big lot?
In the front.
In the front, yeah.
It might be two lots, but yeah.
But it's a single property with multiple houses, okay.
Yeah.
Is there a way for, I mean, not just the road, but it just generally, it needs some beautification over there and some tree planting, so it would be.
Unfortunately, it's a different owner. It's like
Yeah, no, I know.
they've done a good job. And then
I know that. I'm not
the
saying
front,
that's Aria. I'm
yeah.
kind of, I was going to pose the question, is there anything that we can do about
In fact,
that even?
Hip Lofts has been cleaning up along the Fishkill Creek. We went up the other day, and it's a mess, and they've been going in and cleaning up the garbage and dealing.
I mean, there might be a good opportunity, because that property owner owns that road, owns all the property along the creek, just downstream from the bridge, which is basically unbuildable. It's all floodplain.
Right.
There might be some swap that could go on for replacing the road and extending the Greenway Trail further down along there.
That's
So it
exactly what I was
it might be
thinking.
worth looking into.
Yeah, talking with the chair of the Greenway Committee and seeing how, these plans sync up with some of the things they've been working on in terms of the passive trails, getting more use and permission easements from the owners there. It could possibly be coordinated for everyone's benefit.
Well, I'm going a different direction, but very long-term view,
Yeah.
which is there is a concept for putting a access road back to Camp Beacon that would hit 52 about where the dummy light is. And so if there was
Not
an
the
effort.
dummy light.
I'm sorry.
You have dummy light on the
The
brain.
blinking light, sorry. Not that dummy, the other dummy. At the blinking light on 52. And so I'm just trying to understand what might be the broader kind of planning considerations associated with that road. So that's all I was asking. Thank you.
Okay, thanks.
All right. And Nick will be taking us through the next one.
All right?
Great, so the next one is a proposed local law amending the self-storage and parking requirements. And this was also discussed at your first meeting in July. And the proposed local law would add a new parking requirement for self-storage facilities distinct from warehouse storage, utility, or other commercial use. Those uses, a warehouse use, is one space per employee, but one space per 1,000 square feet of gross floor area space. And that definition, warehouse storage, has been defined to be self-storage. And so that was one space per 1,000 square feet of gross floor space. You may recall property owner came in and provided you with examples and demonstrations from the Traffic Institute of Engineers, other development projects, other municipalities, codes, as well as their own studies that showed the parking requirements for self-storage facilities was significantly less than the warehouse storage facility. And so the proposed law that's being drafted has the parking requirements for a self-storage facility at one space per 10,000 square feet of gross floor space, plus one space per employee. And then we just add two definitions. So storage business is being deleted, and we're adding a definition of self-storage facility and adding a definition of warehouse storage. And if you're in favor of this local law being considered here by the public, the next procedural steps are to refer to the planning board for a report and recommendation. And then the planning board in its report and recommendation would send it back to you, and you would then hold a public hearing at your second meeting in September. And it would go to the county planning board as well for a report.
Right, so this discussion is on referring that to planning, right?
Correct, yes. And
Or
schedule a public
the
hearing.
objective, yeah. Okay.
What prompted this conversation again? We just suddenly cared about self-storage, or there was somebody proposing self-storage?
The area is here, you can offer some context for it, but the property owner who's operating the existing storage facility, Lofts, had come in with a request that the spaces be modified and reduced because it was requiring an overabundance of parking and impervious surface.
Well,
So
they're,
LDA is still there, he can offer you some more context.
Yeah, that was the basic idea, that there's a project that was approved, that they haven't executed that phase of it yet, but the owner of Beacon Hip Lofts has that self-storage facility. And when they got the original approval, they had to follow the existing, zoning code for the parking, and it was some huge number in relation to what they've actually been able to see was required, or a normal amount of parking. So they asked their traffic consultant to look at other standards, and they did a survey of what they actually used and a survey of other local facilities, and came up with something that seems to make more realistic sense.
thanks. That's the building going up now, right?
No, that one's a residential one that was
Oh,
approved,
okay.
but it's on the other side of the existing self-storage
Got
building
it.
in that lot.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would just say this is another example of our outdated parking requirements, which are, people are changing in their use of vehicles. So I think it's actually worse than that. I think we've got the wrong type of thing that's including self-storage, because the only times I've ever used a self-storage, nobody's ever there except me and the person who's given me the key and a couple of other things. So
I've rarely pulled into self-storage without a truck either. So.
yeah, I know, right? But
Usually-
it's like you're the only one, or there's not many. There's not many because it's mostly storage. So anyway, any issues with making referral to planning board on this one? Do we want to set a public hearing as well ahead of time, or do we want to wait?
Yeah, that's what's on the agenda, actually,
Okay. So that means
for the voting meeting.
for the after this one, we would set the public hearing for what date are we looking at on the agenda?
September 6th.
Okay.
No, the second meeting, sorry. Because I have to go to the planning board for a report and recommendation.
All right, so
Then
this will
we'd
be,
The 19th on the agenda.
Yeah, we'll be at the 19th.
okay. All right, everybody good with that? So that'll give us about a month. Okay. And then third one, Nick, you're going to do is on another parking one, right? Item 4.
Correct, so this is to correct an inadvertent removal of language from the schedule of permitted uses. You may recall the city council went through an extensive process of revising the schedule of uses and regulations, the tables that list what uses are permitted in certain districts. And you have a local law that's being proposed that would reinstate this subsection 8 that allows off-street parking in residential areas to be used, allows a residential lot to be used for off-street parking. And the requirement is that it can be used for off-street parking so long as it has a shared parcel line for at least 20 feet with a commercial or industrial district, and that the off-street parking shall be on a portion of lot within 200 feet of the commercial or industrial district, and that the use should not be used for fee-based parking for railroad commuters. This language was in there before with two distinctions. Special permit would be issued by the planning board now, not by the city council, consistent with changes you made back in 2020. And additionally, the shared parcel line, it was 25 feet. We're recommending 20 feet. This came up in connection with an application for 16 West Main Street, whose project had started before the changes in the council were made, and they were reviewing it with staff and I think the planning board. And now that they've progressed it and they've gone through the secret process, it came to light that that language was inadvertently omitted and it was meant to remain. And if this language were not added into the code, and this is language that allows an applicant to add off-street parking that's in a residential district so long as it adjoins a commercial district. If they didn't have that provision, that ability to use off-street parking, they could either petition for a zone change to move that property into the district, or they could go to the zoning board of appeals for a variance to reduce the number of off-street parking. So this provision encourages people to locate properties adjacent to a commercial district and use it for off-street parking purposes. So that's what the language of the local law is before you. It would apply uniformly within the city zoning districts and residential districts, and the process would be the same. You would be referring this to the county and city planning board for a reporting recommendation and scheduling a public hearing for your September 19th meeting. And John, is there any additional context you want to provide or comments?
That was a good summary.
Okay, thank you.
This was my mistake. I really feel I should own up to it. When we redid the tables, the tables were a mess, and they had been amended 100 times, and it was very hard to follow the way the tables worked in before 2020. And this provision, which was in the pre-2020 revisions, just got dropped somewhere along the line. We didn't notice it, and now this applicant who's been told that he had to do this all the way along the line, yeah, it was our mistake, and I feel like we should correct it.
Okay. You're telling me that our tables work, which was, I don't know, most of 2 years and going over it over and again, we missed something? So,
Yes, it's hard to imagine.
okay. Any questions?
Why are we changing 25 to 20?
20 is what you need for a driveway. The 25 seemed excessive. And, you know, you want this to be a minimum. If they need more, they can have more. But 20 seemed like it wasn't nearly necessary for a driveway connecting the two parcels. In this case, on 16 West Main Street, there's a rear landlocked parcel that has no access to the street, so this would allow that connection between the parking lots.
With just 10-foot lanes, which is sufficient.
Okay, thanks.
And driveways, I mean, there's only 15 cars that are going to put back on this lot, so it could be even less.
And this was specific, this was struck from this, from which, from the uses and tables? From the uses?
It was originally in the very complicated tables that we
Yeah.
replaced in 2020.
I guess it specifies railroad commuters, so I was wondering if that's because this is supposed to be down by the, are we talking only down by the river?
No, it's citywide, anywhere where in a residential district abuts a commercial or a multifamily district, but, and I have no idea why that was in there, I just repeated it because, it was in the original code and I wanted to make, you know, just,
Yeah,
fix the mistake rather than make drastic changes in it.
well, the way it's written now, it could be used for fee-based parking,
Yeah.
as long as it wasn't for railroad commuters. So why don't we take out 4 railroad commuters?
All right. The only objection I might have to that is that a lot of, not a lot, it hasn't happened in Beacon yet, but across the country, they've started to separate rent from parking so that you don't overpark a site, and so therefore they rent you an apartment, and then if you want a parking space, you have to pay extra for that. So that they don't produce too many parking spaces that aren't going to be used. It's a way of diminishing on off-street parking in the city. So, you know, if you take the railroad commuters away, or maybe you could say fee for off-site parking.
Yeah, I see where you're going. That makes some sense. Well, the other one is, I mean, if they have the capacity and it's underutilized, we're just sort of wasting, you know, impermeable surface space. That means we'll need it somewhere else. So I might be okay allowing it, right?
I'm having a hard time honestly picturing where this applies. This is a parking lot connecting to another parking lot in an adjacent property.
Yes.
Why would you have, sorry.
Yeah, let me see if I can do it. It's think of our T district or our CMS or our waterfront, right? Those zones, if it's got a residential lot kind of behind it, because I'm trying to think through the examples. I'll give you one where it doesn't apply. On Eliza and Church, there's an empty lot across the street. So if somebody wanted to do parking there, that would not be allowed under this language, right, John? It has to be adjacent.
Shared property line.
So there are some, in the T-zone, there are some residential homes on those blocks, and so if one of them was an empty lot and someone wanted to do parking, that one would work.
Okay.
Right? This one is on West Main, right? So apparently there's a landlocked residential lot behind it, right?
Behind the hardware store.
But it has to be adjacent to one of our sort of denser districts. I think is that what the uses are for? Central Main, T, and linkage?
Right, it would refer to the general business, any commercial or industrial district.
All right, so the GB as well, right?
Yeah.
So it'd have to be right next to one of those
Right.
and directly adjacent,
Okay.
right? That's how I read it.
And it allows for some flexibility of land use at those border lines. And in this case, it's a landlocked parcel that can't hardly be used for anything else. The hardware store property sort of encroaches on it already. The residential property encroaches on it. They have a couple sheds that are on the edge of the boundary line. So this sort of makes that parcel that is unusable, usable for parking purposes where it's back behind buildings and out of the way. And it's by special permit, so if the configuration doesn't work for the neighbors or the particular parcel, the planning board has the ability to say no. In this case, they approved this nominally all the way along the line, and then they found out the provision in the code no longer exists when they went for the special permit.
Any other questions? Yeah, I think that, I mean, you Dan, I kind of thought through, I was thinking through where else might it be, or is this a one-off? I think there are some other options where it might be relevant in those kind of enumerated areas, which is why I think it's all right to do it this way.
Okay. Well, you're a step or two ahead of me because I couldn't even figure out what we're doing.
I know. Well, these are the ones where yeah, right, it takes some explanation. Everybody good to go on?
Yep.
Okay. Now, Dan, you have the next one, which is the Wetland Protection, right, from last time.
Yeah, this appeared on the agenda a couple of weeks ago as, I think it was green infrastructure and stormwater management. And I recommended changing it to water body and wetland protections so that we didn't put the solutions before the kind of the overall goals. But I'm going to work from the overview document, which I threw together for Ben last week, that summarized some of the key proposals in the 6 emails, PowerPoints, 2-hour videos, and everything that I sent you. No, I mean, the way that the reason that I brought this up is, you know, well, when I first ran for office in 2019, I was running to get development under control, and the impetus for me getting involved in that whole conversation at all was the balance between human development, economic development, and the natural world. And, you know, we had a big community-wide conversation about development and how it fits in Beacon, and I think that we've made some progress to getting development kind of in balance. But one area that I am still concerned about is how new development is impacting the natural world. And I know that, I mean, I don't know what other council members get, but the creek goes through Ward 4, and I do get a lot of messages from people who see stuff going on down by the creek. They see development going on down by the creek, and they get concerned. And I think they're right. And so what I'm trying to do by, sharing all of this information is to recognize first that, landowners have the right to build on their property, and balance that with with the creek and the adjacent brooks needing to be protected. So what I did here was I just kind of summarized where I got this information from. But what I really want to say is I'm throwing out what I've learned. I'm not an expert on this. This is just some presentations that I encountered that really, to me, felt like solutions to problems that were confronting my constituents in and around the creek. If other people have ideas, like Ran, you're reaching out to Riverkeeper, I'm going to keep reaching out to people to look for new ideas. I'd love it if you all have ideas. Perhaps we could ask Nick to look at what some of the other protections, in this region maybe, there's creeks and brooks all over the place, thousands. Some other communities must have put into place some things like this other than Newburgh. So I guess I'd love to know, what are some of the ideas that are already floating out there that are successful. But anyway, just a quick summary of what we have here. The water body protection overlay was a proposal that I found at the Pace University Land Use Library. It was something that Newburgh was drafting. I don't know whether they ultimately implemented it, but it was recommended through the library as a strong protection plan. So the water body protection overlay that Newburgh has creates setbacks from water bodies, which, from my reading of, I don't know that I got through all of the pertinent local law in Beacon, but I only was able to find the highest bank next to the creek as the limit where you can develop, not any kind of setback. The water body protection overlay in Newburgh is 100 feet. It includes that site plans in the overlay would go to the CAC. It requires erosion and sediment control plans, no increase in impervious surfaces for existing developed lots. So if you already had a property there, you wouldn't be able to add another building, or you wouldn't be able to add a parking lot, but you could add, you could extend your driveway using, say, pervious pavers. Or you could balance that with, you want to put an ADU on your property, and the only way that you're really going to do that is to have appropriate drainage where you're replacing your driveway with pervious pavers, for example. So this is about surfaces, not structures. And then there are similar proposals for wetland overlays, which don't just have setbacks, but also have buffers for human traffic, so keeping people out of the wetlands. And again, this one I didn't have a chance to check what our protections for overlays and for wetland overlays are in Beacon, or any kind of wetland protections. So I'll continue that, but perhaps this goes into the realm of Keen and Bean doing a side-by-side comparison, because I will inevitably get something wrong. A proposal from New York State is that green infrastructure should be a requirement, and the reason for that is you want the water absorption after construction to mirror the water absorption prior to construction as much as possible. This is really important for creeks, and we don't really have a plan. Our current plan for managing stormwater is not water absorption. It's to get the water and take it away and move it away. And the creek actually depends on water coming through that soil, cleaning the water, cleaning the soil, and running out. It's key to habitat. But our plan now is just to have all the water run into grates and then take it out of the area, which is not what we need. And how we would do green infrastructure requirements would be something for much debate. So, and I don't even know how to facilitate that conversation, because you're really talking about, square footage, the surfaces, like we're talking about with existing developed lots. So, are we making a requirement that it's 100%? Are we making a requirement that certain features need to be there? Whatever it may be, it's an open question. The next one is not so much a proposal, but just to make sure that we're doing everything entirely by the book. So the stormwater pollution prevention plan, which is required for properties that are an acre or more along the creek, first of all, we can change that. We can make it required for properties that are smaller than 1 acre. I think for Fishkill Creek, because of the lot size requirements, 1 acre might be okay, but the overlay would not just include the Fishkill Creek district, so we may want to have that conversation. one thing that I learned in the presentation about stormwater management was that if the municipality is not reviewing the stormwater pollution prevention plan, which is called a SWIP, if we're not looking at the SWIP, no one is looking at the SWIP. The SWIP gets submitted to the state, but nobody reads it at the state. So if we're not reviewing those plans, nobody is. Perhaps we are, but questions are, is the most qualified person in the city government and our boards the person who's reviewing the plan? What's the rigor of the review of the plan? What follow-ups are done afterwards? I don't know. So this is just kind of an area where maybe we want to look at the controls that are already in place to protect the creek and the other water bodies, and analyze them and find ways to do it better. Some other ideas for nearby water bodies would be having requirements for, well, I don't know if this would be a law or so much as an internal policy, but that we have certain ways of integrating street trees, putting bioswales, and doing other kinds of green infrastructure components on city property that's adjacent to the creek. And then that the city could also minimize impermeable surfaces. So I know Chris and I talked one time about permeable pavers, and I did some research on it. And there's a lot of options. Some of them do get, some permeable pavers do get stuck, and they get plugs in them, and they have to be pried out. But it does apparently take a long time for that to happen, and there are a lot of options now where that doesn't actually happen so much. So, for example, I think there needs to be an access road down by 248 Tioronda. The city would be managing that road. I don't know whatever the arrangement is, but it would be best if that road was not an impermeable surface, because the water is going to be moving could be moving in one of two directions, and could be moving in the wrong direction or whatever. So, the last couple of recommendations are about mapping our smaller streams and wetlands. So the brook, the creek, the brooks, the creek, the river, there's a lot that is mapped, but the size requirements for what makes it into federal and state maps is bigger than a lot of the wetlands and features that we have in Beacon. And so I don't know whether this is actually something that's a part of the OSI, the Open Space Inventory. It's alluded to in the Natural Resources Inventory, but perhaps some kinds of mapping of the smaller features should be done. And that's something that I feel very strongly about, because there are pockets, a lot of the streams in Beacon, where there's a lot of water that runs between a mountain and a creek. And there's not a lot of streams in Beacon, which means they've been built over. Just behind my house, there's a creek that was routed underground and built on top of, and just the last like 100 feet of the creek is the only place where the wildlife gets water. And we have so much wildlife near our property because there's only one place for them to get cool, fresh, running water. So I think that the last of the streams that we have, we should be protecting. And they may not be the same protections that we give to major water bodies, right? Like, you may not want to put, if there's a stream in someone's neighborhood, you may not have a 100-foot setback from it, because it would just mean that nobody can build on their lot and it would be a taking. But maybe we want to consider that. And then there were some other recommendations for the state at the end of this that I don't think are relevant. I would like to check on them. We don't have any combined sewer overflows in Beacon, but I do see some ugly pipes and something coming out of them around the creek, and I don't know what's in them. And maybe we could just take a look at what flows into the creek out of the city. So what's getting dumped into the creek, what pours into the creek, what comes from the prison, I think we talked about before. So those are just some ideas, and I just wanted to put this out there as kind of like the first things that we can put on the canvas, and maybe and talk through them and potentially add to them. So what do you guys think?
Well, I think how you started out was correct. I think we should do an inventory of what our current legislation looks like in terms of protecting and building along the creek and overflows and everything else. So that would be the first place I would start, and then see what deficiencies show up and how we could improve from there.
Yeah.
But I think that's the really only way to start the conversation, as opposed to redoing things that are already have been done.
Yeah. I did do a pretty good search. Like, I was able to find out the MS4 situation and the SWIP and some of the other things, but some of them I need to go through all the code and find out all of the relevant things. But I did a pretty decent job, I think, of teasing out the ideas that are not in our law.
I mean, I think if you have our MS4 officer, which is John Russo,
okay.
by title it's Mickey, but John Russo does all the reports.
Mm-hmm.
And I also know that the planning board does a lot of this evaluation. So Nick, maybe at a future workshop, we could have Jennifer Gray come, and we could also have John Russo come in and kind of give an overview of what exists today, so that you have a sense of what the process is and can ask questions on how that process works. Would that work for you, Nick, you think?
I think that would be good, Chris, because I think they could provide examples of not only the regulations, but also the practices. So, for example, 25 Townsend was a recent example of a wetland review, and in that case, the planning board required the applicant to reduce the scope of a project and minimize the impact of the wetland, and they also required one-to-one replacing the disturbed wetlands so that there was no loss of wetlands on site. So I think that type of overview from Jennifer and John Russo would be helpful to put it in context, as George and Dan have said, to identify how we're currently regulating it through the code and through practices, and then are there opportunities to enhance those regulations and practices.
And I think,
work with Jennifer on that.
and I think John can also speak to the geology of Beacon, because what is underground matters in terms of green infrastructure. So I built a project with green infrastructure, and we had to make sure that it had absorptive soils underneath. If you're simply, like, we were thinking about this for Veterans Place. You'll recall we almost had a grant that went away to turn that into a pocket park. And we looked at what's below there, and it's mostly clay. And it basically just, if we had put pervious pavers or other pervious materials there, it basically would have just created a bowl, and that clay and the water would have gone into basements around there. So again, I think John can talk about issues like that, because there may be areas of the city where that's more workable.
Yeah, I had the same comment George did. I know we cover some of this somewhere, whether it's seeker or other, and I don't have a good frame to understand what do we do and where do we do it, so I'd like to learn that.
You do it through your SWIP, which is a stormwater pollution prevention plan.
Okay.
And, yeah.
Very good.
And then the other one is that, this is where I think Chris suggested, is there's parts of the city, like, on Main Street, we're not gonna, keep something that's an empty lot, or only allow, a little bit of development. So I think we'd have to distinguish between.
Well, this is just within 100 feet of, the water bodies.
I mean, your major water bodies are the Hudson, Fishkill Creek, Dry Brook, and the.
Well, we got a stream that goes straight underneath
you have
the
submerged,
drugstore, and
yes.
then, right? And so
Well, and
I'm just
there's
saying
a-
we just have to be
There's a
thoughtful about how we do
there's a
it.
memorial to it at Memorial Park.
Yeah, right?
Um,
Yeah. Well, the one at Memorial Park goes under.
All of Main Street, too.
Under Melzinga. It goes under the Melzinga
Yeah.
restaurant, right? I well know the
Not
48
through George's basement.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's just sewage.
But the one that goes through Rite Aid ends up at Madam Brett and then coming into the creek, whereas the one at Memorial Park goes out just after the falls, right? So anyway, the interesting thing here is just to start to learn how to think about it, what we cover and where we want to do additional things and in what areas.
and also to think
And
about.
Fishkill Creek, for example, I'm sorry, Chris.
Go ahead.
Fishkill Creek, for example, the Fishkill Creek zoning district has setbacks from the creek that are built into your code.
Okay.
An average of 50 feet, no less than 25 feet end point. So some of that language
Correct.
doesn't exist.
That's right. Yeah, this expands it to 100 feet. That's right.
And we learned last September, I mean, many of us knew this already, that stormwater conveyance system that we have actually is protective of our water bodies, because it manages the water. The problem with erosion is really exacerbated when you have unmanaged water flow. And so, like, we saw that unmanaged water flow wipe out Pocket Road, for instance. So we redoubled that and made the swales deeper. We made the road more resilient. So frankly, our stormwater system, in many ways, by conveying that water down to the river, is preventing further damage.
Yeah,
Not only
but-
to property, but to ecological things. Like if we didn't, again, if that's going over topsoil and it just washes things away, like parts of our parks.
No, I get it. I mean, the point is to try to do it in a way that you're not creating erosion, but the water is still permeating the soil and making its way down to the creek eventually and being cleaned. And I'm not an environmental biologist, but I'm told that that actually has a lot of value to wildlife, that process.
So we have a workshop on the 12th. Nick, do you want to see if Jennifer might attend that?
Yes.
And I'll see if John Russo can. You're back, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Okay. Other comments on this one?
Well done.
All
Thank
right.
you.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you,
for
Dan.
pulling all of this together.
6.1 is accessible curb ramp bid results. Obviously, that's Chris.
Oy vey. So you may remember that we went out to bid and for curb ramps at 4 locations. There were 7 curb ramps. It's a relatively small job. Engineer's estimate is $45,000. The first set of bids came back. We had 1 bid and it was $95,000, and we rejected that bid. We went back out. We got 2 bids. This time it went down about $6,000, but we're still going to look to reject the bids. We're going to do this work in-house, or we might have a contractor that did not bid because they don't want to go through all the formalities of that, who can get it below the $35,000 threshold for bidding. So Mickey is going to go back out and try to get 3 quotes, see if that works, and if it doesn't, we're going to do it in-house. And we got to do it really quickly because we want to begin the paving work in September, and this is part of that paving work. So we're suggesting we
Reject.
throw these bids out again.
Okay.
Is there a risk to having someone say you can do it for less than 35,000 when everyone else is saying?
Our
90?
engineer doesn't think so. The reason we're getting high bids is because we're bidding it in the middle of their peak season, and it's a really small job.
Mhm.
It's like, yeah, I'll throw a really high number at it, and if I get it, then I'll make some money.
Right.
Ideally, I'd like to see how we do this in-house.
Yeah, that'd be great.
So again, that's the default. If I don't get something below 35 and it looks like a responsible proposal that we know the person does quality work, we'll go with in-house. The trade-off on that is that's 2 weeks of my crews not doing something else.
Right.
And I have them doing a lot of work, as you know.
Okay. So next one is funding resolutions for Fishkill and Teller Ave. And again, that's Chris.
Okay, so some of you have seen resolutions like this before, and this will be new. When you do a federal aid project for transportation projects, typically the federal government will put in 80% of the allowable cost. The state sometimes will then match it with 15% Marchicelli funds, and then the local share is 5%. When you do a revenue agreement with the New York State DOT for these monies, you basically have to pass a resolution saying, we'll pay all of the non-federal share, and if the federal share was to go away for some reason, we do something wrong and they say, well, you're ineligible now, that we pay 100% of the cost. Now that never happens. This is really a formality. So we've done this. I went back and I researched when these projects started. These were launched in 2001. Before 9/11, we started these projects. We have passed 6 resolutions regarding Fishkill Avenue, rebuilding, the roadway, putting in new sidewalks, doing new crosswalks, light work, and then we've done 4 on Teller Avenue. So the 2 resolutions you're doing tonight bring the amount that you've authorized up to the current engineer's estimate for construction inspection, and it backfills us on some of the shortages we had on earlier phases, the engineering design, right-of-way incidentals, and right-of-way acquisition. I want to thank the Dutchess County Transportation Council. We were $1.8 million short on Fishkill Avenue, and they worked with me to take unassigned monies from this fiscal year, this federal fiscal year, and they backfilled us. And then they similarly are going to backfill us in October when the new federal fiscal year comes up on another shortfall of about $164,000 on Teller. So we're, I may have reported this previously, but we just finished right away a couple weeks ago after a year full court press. We are looking to go to bid in November and go to construction next spring. So this is the next critical path step. I have to put into effect the revenue contract with DOT so they can approve us to go to bid. And I did go back and look up all of the resolutions, which I'm not going to do ever again. But you have every resolution that we've passed, and you could see this got stalled somewhere around after the financial collapse of 2008. And then there was what I understand is we got hit with consent orders for wastewater, and we ended up having to spend a lot of money on that. And the road was so bad, we used CHIPS money to pave it in 2009, and then we had to leave that in place for 10 years. Once you use CHIPS money, you can't touch the road for 10 years. So then my predecessor restarted the project in 2019. But it's a long time coming, and there's light at the end of the tunnel. So we have those resolutions before us tonight. And just to give you an update, the two projects together, the total of everything on Teller Avenue will be $2,589,670, and then on Fishkill will be $7,212,962. It comes to $9.8 million.
Are there drawings of and engineering plans for all of this?
No, we thought we'd wing it.
I meant yet. Sorry. That's right. Just a hammer and a screwdriver.
There are sets of plans that I can send you a link to download.
Okay.
They're too big to send.
Yeah.
And but this is one of the most regulated things you'll ever see. Every plan, every step has to go through DOT to make sure we're using standard features. We're doing ADA compliance. We did include in this project the lead pedestrian interval on Main Street for that light.
Great.
So we've made amendments along the way to try to capture everything. We'll never capture everything, but as long as I get this basic project done, we can build off that.
Yeah. No, I'm not asking to see the things because I would be proposing any changes. Anthony Ruggiero told me that the George Washington head was going to be moved to the corner, and I just wanted to see what that was going to look like.
Okay.
And then there was some discussion about the intersection at Ron's, about putting, I thought maybe you brought this up, there's putting like a raised.
There's a raised crosswalk there.
That's great.
There's at least one, if not two, in that immediate area.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I'll send you guys the plans. George Washington will be moved slightly because he gets hit. He's kind of like the dummy light of Teller Avenue. And the reason we didn't restore the facade on the base of that when it got damaged the last time is we knew we were going to move it anyway. So like we'll move it, and then if it needs to get fixed up further, we'll fix it.
Well, the flowers around it look lovely right now.
Well, we'll move the flowers too.
That's good.
And you have to see the flowers we planted at the sewer treatment plant. You lose your minds.
I'll check it out.
Yeah.
I just want to say a shout out to my alma mater, who I think donated that, George Washington University donated that bus to the city of Beacon. There was a plaque on the back.
Wow.
And when I was in college in the early 90s, that exact bust was right next to my dorm.
Really?
Yeah, they must give them out to places that.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, so.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
I'll cut that section out of the plans, excerpt it, so I can send it to you all.
You'll send the link, right?
Well, I can actually just take that page out of the plans.
Okay. And everyone okay with that? And those are going to be on the full meeting agenda, right?
Yes, both of those. They're separate resolutions because they're separate project
Projects.
identification numbers.
Okay.
And you can just tell from the number how old this thing is. These are pins that haven't been used in 20 years.
So you can tell Chris is excited about this.
It's a great project.
Bill.
And thank you again for
Yeah.
including the leading pedestrian intervals at
Sure.
that intersection.
Sure.
And all the research on the resolutions.
That was actually kind of wild. I got to a point where I couldn't find all of them, and I was like, let's go back and look again, because I'm not leaving gaps. But I had no idea it went back to, I thought it went back to 2011, and it actually goes back to 2001.
Goodness.
All right, and then we got some amendments to
Right,
the
you
budget.
got operating budget amendments?
Yes.
Okay.
Let me pull those up here, Mayor. So I'm pinch hitting for Susan tonight here. Okay, so the first one, we have a trust and agency, which is like an escrow fund for donations we get for fireworks. We spent $10,000 this year on the fireworks at Memorial Park, and we're looking to transfer $10,000 out of our $13,000 account to cover that. Any questions? I'll just keep going through, but
I'm just, maybe this is a Susan question, but curious how this trust and agency sort of fund works, and if this is something that can be used to raise money for other projects as well.
Yeah, so I can actually answer that. We can't solicit funds as a city. However, when people come forward and say, here's $10,000 for fireworks, if it's for a particular use that we support and want to do, we can put it in a trust and agency account, so it can't be commingled with our general fund. If they wanted to give us $10,000 to, shoot fireworks into Newburgh, we probably would say no. But on things that we want, we could. So if somebody, for instance, we get people who want to donate trees sometimes and benches. I can't solicit that, but if they call the city, we can find a mechanism for it.
Because, the tree committee accepts donations.
Yes.
To purchase trees.
Yes, but we can't solicit them. That's
Right.
the.
Okay.
All right. Number two, we have had 2 employees leave over the past year, and so the first one is a shorter-term employee, the second one is a long-term employee, and then there's a retiree that we had to pay additional severance to. So again, these are things that Susan accounts for and puts them in contingency. So like as we're now developing our budget for next year already, and one of the questions we ask all the department heads is, who's eligible to retire next year? And we try to we actually run a calculation on how much sick time and other accruals they had that would have to be paid out. Number 3 are small overtime items that are in 3 different departments. And I didn't know what they were. All right. So the first overtime is in the finance department. With COVID, we have gotten behind a little bit in processing water payments and hauler payments, so I authorized some overtime there. The second overtime is for the cleaner, Angel, who cleans this building. The third is for the parks, and the fourth was recreation staff related to camp stuff. So again, this to me is a de minimis amount, and I'm not worried about it. And the last item, we have police overtime for different things, and we categorize that because we recapture those funds. So you'll see OT is overtime for the school district. The school district asks us to have police at certain events, like basketball games, and then they pay us for that overtime. So we're going to be increasing the expense for that school district coverage of $5,000, and then the school pays us back. Similarly, when we've done the recent filming with Poker Face, they had to pay for police. So we have to clock the expense of what we paid the police, and then they actually pay that plus a little bit of profit that goes into things like dummy lights.
I've seen our police at the Calico Ball too, just so you know.
At the Calico Ball,
Yeah.
I don't think I authorized that.
It was a few years ago, right?
Yeah, it was.
Oh,
a while
okay.
ago. Yeah. Yeah.
Were they dressed up?
Can't remember.
All right, we'll have to look into this. So these are just minor amendments. We'll probably have a couple of these along the way towards the end of the year, but these are pretty minor.
Any questions? Okay. How about an update on Lewis Tompkins and then an update on the wastewater treatment plant?
All
And then
right.
you're going to tell us about reservoirs. Those are all yours.
Jeez.
Just,
All
you
right.
know, don't be as excited as you are about the
We're about to
reconstruction.
build stuff, Mayor.
Yeah, I know.
This is an exciting time. Update on Lewis Tompkins hose. At one of the prior meetings, you authorized the contract for the construction management firm. We're still working on finalizing that contract and hope to have that done soon, but he's already working on that. Our next steps are to bring the architect here on September 6th for an update on his plans. And again, he's confirmed some of the things we're doing, investigations about the hazmat materials in the building. And it looks like in the next week or 2 weeks, we'll be confirming that a little different way of proceeding with the project. Initially, we had thought about phasing the project, so we built the new $6,000 addition, I wish it was 6,000. 6,000 square foot addition on the north end, and then swinging the space, but leaving the fire activities in the hall while that was taking place.
Meaning build the new bays so you could move the trucks over and then work on the main building.
And so in talking to the new construction manager, and then in evaluating all of the asbestos and lead that we have to remediate in the existing facility, that no longer made sense. And what we're going to try to do is start the project earlier with at least 2 phases. One would be hazmat remediation, so we go in and we cloak the whole building in plastic so that we can take out all of the asbestos and lead. In order to do that, we would be clearing the building, and our chief and I are diligently working to move the 2 firefighters out of there and relocate the apparatus over to the highway garage, and they would be at Maze for most of the day training anyway. And then what we would do is start the rock removal on the north side, which would be really disruptive to their activities anyway. So we're thinking we would go in and we would take out the rock necessary to get down to a base for the new part of the firehouse and clean up the old firehouse, and then bid the job with a clean firehouse and a clean pad at the north. And we think we would both save money and time by trying to queue that up to start at the beginning of the year rather than the beginning of the spring. And we can do the rock removal in the winter because it's mostly hammering. And we would not be blasting because we have gas lines in the area, but we do need to go down at least 5 or 6 feet and take out that rock. So Bob Mitchell, our architect, is going to come and bring you back a new rendering. I've told him, make this thing look brick so it doesn't look like, I think the first renderings you saw were very bland and basic. And he'll be confirming some of the things that we are investigating right now, like whether we can use geothermal heat pumps. And we're doing the test wells on that. We'll be looking on September 6th. If you're ready to move forward on the project, I will have some basic estimates by then of where we are. And I'd like to do the amendment to extend his contract. So he's done with design development as of that meeting, and then I would want to just roll into the next phase of the contract. And I want to get kind of your assent to move forward with the project. So that's where we are in the project. We are communicating. Lee and I met with the volunteers. We're trying to work with them so that the historic artifacts and the memorabilia that are in there, we figure out what goes in the new firehouse, what needs to be stored. Some stuff is like old furniture and TVs will just go, and they own a lot of that. So we're going to be, once we confirm this, we'll be speeding up the timeline in which we exit that building, and then we'll be making, looking for your feedback on the 6th. And Dan, we can certainly send whatever presentation he has to you, so you can see
I'll watch
that.
it anyway.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
Chris, I forget, do the engines exit in the new design, exit onto 9D as opposed
Yeah,
to?
primarily. So you're going to be building three new bays with the active equipment that go right onto 9D, which is great, because if you see them when they do emergencies, they've got to go out to the light and then make a left, and it gets really congested there. The South Avenue bays, there are currently 3. That would be reduced to 2, and we would have our backup apparatus, which isn't used unless everything else goes down, and then it would be the bay for ambulance for the short term. And really where we're moving is we would probably put an electric fly car in there. So we're looking to have an electric charger and some kind of like electric vehicles that they can go to EMS calls without taking the whole rig with them.
Part of why I was asking that is, I assume with them exiting there, that will be considered the front of the building.
It will. We're turning, we're reorienting the building. So the monument in the back, we're looking to pull up to the front to really highlight that. The stuff that you don't want in the front of a building, like the garbage and the tank for your generator, that's going to go on the South Avenue side. And again, we'll do it appropriately so it has fencing and stuff and doesn't create an eyesore there. But the facade on 9D is what we're looking to really improve and make that the entrance and the doorway to that facility.
Great.
And then we'll be redoing that whole parking lot with either 52 or 55 spots. Right now, if you have 25 people haphazardly parked there, you're done. There's just no room. So we're going to design that thoughtfully and hopefully fix the parking issue on this part of town with some reserved parking for our volunteer and career staff.
I can tell you anecdotally, the shortening of the construction period is viewed as a positive by the firefighters. So,
yep.
Right, because the disruptions down, was it 10 months maybe instead of 14?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or 10 to 12 instead of 14 to maybe more than 14.
Yeah. Okay.
And the painting of the mountain goats, who gets that?
Well, we're going to talk to Mark about that. We have to figure out where the mountain goats get painted and what color they are and who gets to paint them.
No, the painting in the front, in the
I
lobby.
thought you wanted to paint one on the...
There's a painting of 2 mountain goats.
Oh, the heavy
and nobody
painting
knows
one.
where it came from?
No, I think we're going to auction that off.
Okay.
If you apply to Mark's, if you answer Mark's survey, maybe we can raffle off that painting.
All right.
But nobody knows where it came from. The frame is not particularly valuable. The art is not particularly valuable.
Well, to you.
And it would take 3 people to carry it.
Yeah.
So.
The volunteer company didn't put a lot of priority on that one either.
Yeah, they didn't really want it.
I'll follow up
It's like
on
not
this.
ours.
Yeah.
And they are, to their credit, they're already working with the memorial building because they have some war memorials over there. And so they've been working with our veterans groups to relocate some of those. And I know they've been in touch with Beacon Historical Society, too.
Great.
So we really appreciate them. Change is hard, and we really appreciate them trying to work with us.
Yeah, I will just say that the meeting we had with the leadership there was really thoughtful, and I just thought it was, very impressive that they can kind of see the change, and as long as we can work with them and continue to honor all the companies, that we'll get it done. So.
All right. So on the agenda tonight in the voting meeting, we also have a resolution authorizing me to submit a grant application to the WIA program. And the WIA is the Water Infrastructure Improvement Act. New York State has $225 million that they are going to be awarding, and the grant is due on September 9th. So the engineers that we've begun working with on the wastewater treatment plant said, we know that you put in your capital program an upgrade to the dewatering system. This is the system that takes the solids and separates it from the water, and our belt press has been breaking down. It's literally at the end of its life, and we're losing revenues and capacity because it breaks down so often. So we're looking at two options. One is replacing it with a new belt press, or the second option is moving towards a centrifuge. It's like a big salad spinner that takes the water out. And the salad spinner actually gets more water out of it. So we're not shipping as much water to landfills and trucking that weight. So we think we have a project. We've done some some initial estimates, and right now we would have to rebuild the building to accommodate that and update things. So we're at a project that looks like it's going to be about $5.54 million. The good news is this WIA grant would cover 40%, or about $2.2 million. So what I'd like to do, I signed a grant agreement last week with Ty and Bond, our engineering company, to help us prepare this grant. It was just a few $1,000s, and they are putting together an estimate. What we would like to do is tonight pass, just get confirmation that you want to move forward on the grant and preparing it, and then at the September 6th meeting, we would need to pass a bonding resolution for the high amount. And again, if we pass it and we don't need all of it, that's okay. And then we would also want to pass the contract for the engineering design, because we have to submit that to the state by the 9th as well. So again, this is like the next critical path project on improving the wastewater treatment plant. And it will help with odor control. It'll help build our capacity. We can operate more quickly and process more sludge. And again, it's about reliability, because both our belt press and our auger have been breaking down regularly, and we're out of chewing gum and duct tape.
What was the cost of the project in the capital plan? Was it $5.5 million?
No, that's a good question. So we had it at $2.8 million.
Okay.
The construction now is estimated to be $3.78 million, and then there's soft costs on top of that. So we've gone really high with this number that you're going to approve is only for the grant, right? We think it's high. We think we've put in 20% contingency, which normally I don't do more than 10. We've put in 20% for design and construction inspection, but the odor control wasn't included in that, and
Okay.
we don't want to leave that out.
Got it. When we make changes to when we get grants that can cover things that we expected to be in the capital, going out to bond, do we do budget amendments, or do we do any kind of votes when those things happen?
You don't typically, you'll vote on an agreement if we need, but in this case, the money that we'd be applying for the grant, if it's awarded, it actually makes up the difference between what you've already approved and what we think the budget is going to be.
Right.
Yeah. So we don't typically amend the capital budget when we get additional revenues. We just don't bond as much.
Right.
What's the state body WIA stands for?
WIA is the Water Infrastructure Improvement Act. So it's state money, and it's we applied to the Environmental Facilities Corporation, which is a sub-agency of the New York State DEC. So they do water, wastewater, and they're pretty flush with money because of all of the federal infrastructure money that's coming down.
I assume there were some federal funds, a little off topic, but since we're talking about the funding, there was a federal funding for replacing lead pipes to homes. Do you know if that's made its way to the state yet, or whether there's do you remember that was one of the president's initiatives, was to create funding for states to replace drinking water pipes in residential homes with non-lead. And has anybody heard anything of where that's going? No? Okay.
No, but I know as part of our water meter project, we're doing a little add-on that when we find lead in the lines going from our mains to the home, we're replacing them out.
Oh,
Because
wow.
at some point, you're going to have to, there's a lead and copper rule coming
Mhm.
down that starts to be enforced in 2024 or 2025. So fortunately, only certain areas of the city have that problem. It was really during certain era
Yeah.
that you had that, and newer homes don't have it, and
Right.
so we're trying to identify and map where those areas are, because once that goes into effect, then every year you have to dial it down a certain
Mhm.
percentage.
Okay.
Um,
Well, it's the thing, it looks like. So I don't know if we could get that funding,
What's that?
if the city could get that funding for the little bits that you're replacing.
I don't think that's a lot, no. And again, with a lot of these grants, like, I don't even go for the smaller EFC grants, because they're really tough.
Yeah.
And like, if you're getting millions of dollars, it's worth jumping through all the hoops. But like for, yeah, a couple thousand, it's not always worth it. And then we have water to talk about, I think.
Yep.
Water. So, just a reminder, we have 3 major reservoirs. Cargill is our largest with 158 million gallons. Mount Beacon is our second largest with 125, and then Melzinga comes in around 58 million. And then we have the little pocket dam that's about 200,000 gallons. That is like the holding tank for Mount Beacon. As you know, we've been retrofitting and rehabilitating the pocket dam. So Mount Beacon has been offline, and we haven't been using that. Right now, Mount Beacon's only about 3 feet below the spillway, so we're at good capacity with Mount Beacon. Cargill is similarly only 3 feet below the spillway. And Melzinga, we typically use in the spring and early summer, and we basically use it up. It has the largest watershed, so it replenishes quickly, but then it runs out and runs dry pretty quickly. Overall, we're at about 70% reservoir capacity, and then we have the 2 wells that we draw from our well fields that we own in the town of Fishkill and then the village of Fishkill. We're using about 2.5 million gallons a day. About 2 million gallons are coming from groundwater, and another 500,000 from the surface water. Ben, we lost our Zoom here on the smart board. We are not in, thanks. We're not in a drought yet, but we may be by the end of August. So we would just say to the public that to the extent you can conserve water, that will help to stave that off, and having broader restrictions. By our code, if we get to 60% capacity, the mayor then declares a stage 1 alert, and that invokes certain restrictions. Right now, we're in pretty good shape. We're one of the few municipalities that both has ground and surface water supplies. So we're doing a lot better than Kingston, which, you know, is in a serious drought emergency because they're fully reliant on one reservoir that's really low. So we're doing well. We hope people will continue to conserve water, and we are conserving water. The pocket dam repair alone will save us 80,000 gallons of water a day that we were losing through seepage. If you add that up, that's almost a month. Over the course of a year, that's about a month's supply of water.
Well done.
You know, so we're looking to also expand our wells at some point in Fishkill. We have a test well there, and it would be like having a backup in case one of the other wells goes down. It's kind of like a new straw into the same cup. So we're not expanding the water that we have, but we have another way of getting it out.
This is an existing well. It was a test well that was never fitted out, and we actually discovered it, and then we're just going to fit it out. Right, so pretty inexpensive way of getting another piece of the puzzle.
But it would just be a backup well, I think, right?
Yeah. And the good news here is even with our development, we've gone from using about 3 million gallons a day to 2.5 by doing these things like fixing leaks in our system, and pushing conservation. So we're doing well on water, and again, to the extent people can, not run their sprinklers in the middle of the hot afternoon, that helps us stay in this good status.
Yeah. Any questions, or? That's just good information. Thank you.
Thanks, Chris.
Yeah, and the pocket will be done in 4 weeks, so we hope to have a little ribbon cutting that we'll let you all know about.
We'll invite the dummy.
Well, hopefully they won't just open it like the dummy light, and it ends up on social media, and then we're done.
All right.
So that's all I had on that, Mayor.
Any last comments in the workshop before we go to full council meeting? Okay. Are we okay to go straight into council, or do we want to take a minute before we do that? Everyone okay?
Yeah, that's good.
All right, let's do it. Okay, so
Yeah,
let's
the
move
chairs.
to our voting meeting, and, I just want to call it to order, and let's do our pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you all. We did roll call, but we can take a look again, and it's the same suspects, and Molly's still on vacation, and we still have a city attorney and a planner remote, and Ben is, for the most part, behind the curtain. So, everybody good? The first thing on the agenda
Public comment.
is public comments. And anyone who would like to make a public comment, this is the first opportunity. You have up to 3 minutes on any topic, except if we're having a public hearing, and we are. We're having a public hearing on accessory apartments, which exist in our code, but there's something to simplify. And so other than that, you're welcome to make any public comments up to 3 minutes of your choice, and we'll start with people physically here. And I've got a sign up, and the first one is T. Craft. Thank you.
Teresa Kraft. Thank you. Well, here we go again, watching the same team of architects and legal representatives build more of the same generic boxes, with another phase of construction at the Beacon Lofts and Studios. The public is left with the same questions. Why are we still asking for the city to make it mandatory to have these developers and all the other applicants show us what the potential finished build would look like in relation to its surrounding environment, both the natural and the built? We will be told it's preliminary, but we will still be asking for it at the end of the approval process. We're looking at a proposal with a large standalone building with a few cars and trees thrown in. We're not seeing how it lays out on the land within the neighborhoods. This does not give the public the full impact that this extensive building complex will have on the neighbors of Lydia Drive, Spencer Lane, and Mill Street, as well as the homes across the Fishkill Creek on Liberty and Washington. This will bring in more light and noise pollution into these off-site residential neighborhoods. Here you have Artist Workspace and 28 residential units with 95 parking spaces, yet across the city, we are seeing a project on Route 9D where they propose a venue space with the capacity of 198 patrons with 31 parking spaces by the same design and law firm. These numbers don't add up. They're not showing the full picture. Show us how the Prophecy Theater project will affect all its surrounding neighbors, not just a select few neighboring properties. Then let's talk about the congestion on Route 9D and the planned use of our public parking lots. I thought I had missed the memo. I wanted to ask the city about the drought warning. Good to hear the city is faring well on the wells and reservoirs, but what about the issue of burn ban? With the end of summer holidays approaching, I fear there will be lots of residents and visitors having that last hurrah bonfire. Thank you.
Thank you. The other one on the sign-up is Gebman.
So, I'd like to refer to the Beacon Loft project in its wholeness for a minute. While The northernmost segment is before the government today. It is attached to the colossus that includes the dam, historically speaking. And when we take the Texaco situation, where as Paloma, I sent Mr. Manager, I sent out a little document out to you, and I sent other documents out to the board, but not cohesive, and I'll see if I can't throw it together. But it says threats from water. The groundwater is contaminated, referring to Fishkill Creek, but it is not used for drinking purposes in the site in the city. It goes on and talks about the contamination in the Fishkill Creek that's south of the railroad bridge, between the railroad bridge and the dam. So the question is a property owner with 500 feet in the Fishkill Creek, I'm concerned about flood inundation, and I'm also concerned about pollution. Now, the dam is a complex thing that gets taxed and commingled with state taxing authorities, and Lee can get into that. But the problem is that the document before the city council, the unsigned environmental form, does not check off that the dam is adjacent to the property being developed. And that minor little thing raises questions as to the legal liability for the dam, and what happens if it bursts, or what about the sediment behind it, the toxic sediment that is amassed at the base of the dam, the 34-foot high structure. So the complication is that I believe that it is in the city's best interest to retain an independent law firm to supervise the compilation of documents as the planning board would normally do in terms of having reimbursement for engineers or site planners, and that the city be reimbursed for a title analysis as to the city's vulnerability as to a dam break or restoration of clean water behind it. And I'm a little bit leery that the omission of the checkpoint of the dam is a intentional convenience for the developer that I wouldn't think that the members of the council would want to be a party to. And so I think the council should hold the document and seek outside counsel as to the liability of the entire campus that's been proposed and built as it relates to the leasehold's interest with the dam, and come to a conclusion as to the city's vulnerability and the public's vulnerability as well.
Thank you. Anyone else in the physical public want to make a comment tonight? Okay. Is that a yes or no? No, okay. Ben, and anyone online?
There are no raised hands at this time, Mayor.
Okay. All right, let's go on to the public hearing. We have a public hearing to amend some chapter of the code that concerns accessory apartments. And again, the accessory apartments are already permitted. This would be some changes to simplify. Let's just do a motion to open the public hearing, and then we'll get a quick summary from someone. Can I get a
Motion to open the public hearing on ADUs.
Second?
That was Ren and Dan.
Nick.
Do we need to do an all in favor to open? Or do we just need a motion and a second to open it? I'm forgetting.
No, you did vote.
Okay, so all in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Nick, you want to do the quick summary of what are the changes?
I'll do a summary. I'll
Yep.
do the best to make it quick.
Yep.
So the board has in its packet a memo on the accessory apartment local law, the city planner's memo on it, the draft local law, and the environmental assessment form. I would refer the public to the project narrative on the environmental assessment form. It really gives a nice overview of the purpose and intent, but I'm going to read certain passages from just to put the law in its context. States the purpose of the proposed local law is to create more flexible and inclusive regulations for accessory apartments, to streamline the review process, avoid unnecessary variances, provide options for more diverse households, help existing homeowners maintain their properties, and incrementally supply smaller, more affordable dwellings with a low impact level on existing neighborhoods. Goes on to note that accessory apartments are currently permitted in all R1, all RD, and T zoning districts by a special permit approval from the planning board. And the proposal of the law amends the city code to permit the development of accessory apartments on all existing single-family properties in those zoning districts, subject to site plan approval from the planning board, so removing the special permit requirement. And under the proposal of the law, so the accessory apartments would not require a special permit approval, the law further exempts any proposed accessory apartments located entirely within an existing single-family dwelling from site plan approval. The building inspector would have the approval authority for accessory apartments that meet that criteria to ensure that they meet the requirements of the city code section 223-24.1 and are contained entirely within an existing single-family dwelling. The proposal of the law limits the floor area of accessory apartments to 50% of the total square footage of a single-family dwelling, and in addition, in no case shall the total square footage of the accessory apartment exceed a maximum of 1,000 square feet or be less than 200 square feet. The law does continue the provision that the planning board can continue to permit larger accessory apartments where appropriate in an existing accessory building that was constructed prior to August 1st, 1989. The proposal of law maintains the requirements in the city code section concerning off-street parking, but the proposal of law includes language to allow the landlord to waive off-street parking requirements where deemed appropriate, and the proposal of law maintains the language requiring that the owner of the single-family lot upon which the accessory apartment is located occupy at least one of the dwelling units, and also that the properties cannot be used for short-term, the accessory apartment cannot be used for short-term rental. Mayor has an overview of the local law.
Okay, thank you, Nick. I'll now entertain comments from the public on the public hearing. If you have a comment, you're welcome to come and speak. We'll do the in-person first. All right, we got everybody. All right, great.
Teresa Kraft. I do not agree. I believe these will have a negative impact on neighboring properties. I'm concerned, and I think we should all be, for having too many accessory apartments in our R1-5 and R1-7.5 zones. We see a large uptick on the requests. Splitting up the number of single-family houses that sit on 1/8 of an acre and building more dwelling units in many areas of the city is not the solution to the world's population problem. For one, they're often placed too close together. This will cause parking problems, put a drain on all of our utilities, from electricity to water to sewer. Each house should have space for 2 cars, and if it's a double house, there should be 4 cars. Contrary to popular belief, we are not a walking city. Households have multiple cars, and to consider waiving the parking requirement for units is preposterous. Sorry, it's a long day. Ask yourself, how many cars do you have in your driveway or in your neighbor's? To put this in another light, modern construction techniques, including lightweight wood trusses, vinyl siding, and other construction materials, ensure a hot fire and a toxic fire. Most time, houses situated not over 10 feet apart, with 35 to 40 feet street frontage. Walls are generally not fire rated. They will be drywall on the inside of the exterior, but combustible materials on the outside of the wall, which facilitates spread from the fire. Building windows are likely to be present on the facing walls, and because of the commonality of designs, there's a very good chance the windows face each other, which can further exacerbate the potential for fire spread from dwelling to dwelling, which will be PVC and very toxic. Limited congestion off-street parking may create severe access challenge to firefighters, especially during the holidays and weekends. Overdevelopment of adding more accessory apartments is a no-win for all existing residents. We're told this is planning for family members or friends who need housing support at lower cost or no cost, but that is really a thinly veiled disguise, because most of these units that will come online are for people who want them just to make a large profit. The city needs to stop jumping on the bandwagon. We need to watch what other municipalities are now doing because they're pulling this all back and reversing the flood of these units. And I hope you all saw the fire in Peekskill where it like jumped from building to building. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Let us know your name and where you live.
Yeah, Mike Pantliano, St. Luke's Place. Very well said, thank you very much. My understanding is that the big driver for this is to help drive cost of rent down, or at least partially to do that. But I believe last time this was discussed, the city planner said the majority of people using these are relatives, so it's not really a rent issue at all. It's just really sharing your house or expanding a household. So it's not really solving the issue at hand, which is rent price, which is a national problem. It's not a local problem. So I think with the cost of everything else, taxes, everything else, which is really driving value of rent up as well, maybe we need to think of other things outside of accessory housing, auxiliary housing, and look at other avenues to drive rent down. That's all I had. Thank you.
Thank you for being here.
What do I have, Mr. Mayor? Is it 5 minutes?
You do. Tell us your name, what street you live on?
Clark Edmund, 2 Wilson Street in
Thank you.
Beacon. If I can get my stopwatch here. Any rate, so the accessory apartment thing is no substitute for affordable housing. Looking at the LA statistics presented in the packet before you, it was determined that 18% were beneficiaries of lower than market rental out of the 60. So less than 1/3. The remaining 40% was friends and relatives in the study. It has no real bearing on Beacon, but it is illustrative to the point that, you know, it's not all it's cracked it up to be. I think that Councilwoman Paloma, if I don't mean to isolate you, but in your last meeting of the workshop a week or 2 ago, you pointed out that you thought that it lacked substance. And it's a very astute observation. Because the city doesn't fundamentally allow for two-family housing. Setting aside the inequities of social justice and fair housing and all the other kinds of words you want to use for the moment, the facts of the matter are that the lack of 2, 3, and 4 family housing eliminates the potential for the full cross-section of society to afford to live in Beacon. A bank does not recognize an accessory apartment. So the beneficiaries of this law are homeowners that want to generate capital for grandma to move in the house. Let's look at it from the most positive perspective. But in reality, it doesn't do lickety-split for affordable housing. Because affordable housing, the bank looks at when they say, okay, how much money do you earn? Well, 75%, roughly speaking, of rent is attributable to or paying the mortgage. So that means a person can afford a larger mortgage. The council really needs to become more familiar with the dynamic and economics of each class of housing, 1, 2, 3, 4. And you should really certify the ideal lot, what it looks like, how does it function. It should not leave parking to the planning board to arbitrarily decide who should get it and who should not. What the council should instruct the planning board and the planners to come up with ideal or typical or normal 5,000 square foot lots and how parking works and the different kinds of scenarios and how you can digress. But it's not that many scenarios. It's a really, really simple standards process that could be applied uniformly to help abate the confusion that will be caused by the arbitrariness of not requiring solutions as to the additional parking spots. If you do that with the accessory housing, at least you haven't polluted the process to favoritism, number one. But number two, what you really need to look at is really creating affordable housing by coming up with what does a 50-foot lot, what does a 75-foot frontage lot, what is a 10,000 square foot, what do they look like, typical sketches, how they're applied, how the families work. You don't want the second entrance in the front of the house because you still want to look like a first? Fine. But lay the standards forth. But this is just a feeble attempt to solve the affordability crisis in the city of Beacon. And I'm not trying to be negative here, but I think that the city needs to have better valuation, property valuation, development statistics and numbers, and so you learn how that's achieved and for what income category. And how does a 70,000 wage earner have a $400,000 mortgage because they have 2 additional tenants to help boost their money? Or the 4th family that automatically becomes a business enterprise and is rife full of deductions that would make Trump blush.
15 seconds.
So the reality is there are techniques and economics in play here, and this is not the answer. It might be nice for the moment to placate, but I can assure you it is not anywhere close to the proper answer. And I paraded you folks months ago with a typical scenario. I know it's scrawled all over, it looked like, but I'll tell you something. If you followed and tried to understand the pathway, you have all the information you need to understand the importance of that kind of math to provide for the people of the community a house of their own.
Thank you. Ben, anyone online want to contribute to the public hearing?
No hands raised, Mayor.
Yeah, you have one.
Mayor, we have one hand raised now.
It's down now.
Okay. Just give it a second, we'll see.
It's up again.
It's up, it's down.
All right, Elaine, would you like to speak?
Okay. Yes, tell us your name and where you live.
Elaine Chacha, North Elm Street. Way to schedule a public hearing. This law, there's no way this is going to provide affordable housing. The idea that we need extra housing units, in the last 10 years, we've added a minimum of 440 rental units. We've also added at least 125 condos. We have more coming online. Edgewater has finally broken ground. It's 267 units. There's the one down at the bottom of West Main Street and others. And there's no way this is going to be affordable. It's an encroachment on the residential areas. It's going to change the density in residential areas, which the comprehensive plan states is not what they're aiming to do. I don't see how this coincides with the comprehensive plan. And I, for the life of me, can't figure out how they're not going to be short-term rentals. We've been told we have a handle on that now. Well, nothing I've seen shows that there's been any change in the situation with short-term rentals. And you look to the past to predict the future. Hiring the firm to track them is one thing, but just looking quickly, there's an RV in somebody's driveway that's listed. That's pretty low-hanging fruit. We couldn't get that without hiring a firm to track them down. There are people with listings where they state, oh, we live here, we live there, we don't live in Beacon. Again, pretty low-hanging fruit. We can identify them. The problem is not the identification half as much as the willingness to enforce it. And we have yet to see any of that happen. And until we do, I can't see why you would approve something like this, because even if it was initially for mom, in 10, maybe 20 years, they're going to be gone. What's going to happen with that unit then? Especially if the planning board waives parking because grandma doesn't drive anymore. Well, when grandma's gone, whoever they're going to rent it to is probably going to want to drive. It's just an ill-conceived notion that keeps getting pushed, and I really fail to understand why. Thank you.
Thank you, Elaine. Others online?
You have no other people online, Mayor.
Okay. What's the interest of council on this hearing? You want to close it? I think we had not much in the way of comments, so.
Well, we have a lot more discussion to have. Right?
That doesn't happen in the public hearing.
No, I know. So.
Well, I think the question would be how substantial a set of changes we might do from this one. Would that be right, Nick, in terms of thinking through whether we should close it or extend it, adjourn it?
That is correct, because you just do a material substantive change, you would then have to reopen the public hearing, so that would involve decide, make the decision for you.
What are we all thinking? Right? If you think that we should be discussing substantial changes, my suggestion would be to adjourn it. Right?
Yeah, adjourn.
Okay. Well, let's entertain a motion to adjourn then.
Make a motion to adjourn the public hearing.
You want to pick the 2nd September, or you want to pick the first meeting of September for rehearing?
Second.
All right.
We may not have comments back from Dutchess County by the first meeting of September.
Okay. So is there a motion to adjourn to the 2nd council meeting of September?
Yeah, I'll make a motion to adjourn the public hearing to September, the 2nd council meeting of September.
I think it's the 19th. Is that right?
6.
It's the 19th.
19th,
Yeah.
yep.
Is there a second?
Second.
All right. Any discussion? Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Okay, so we've adjourned the public hearing to the 19th, and then we'll schedule a discussion at workshop, which would be the 12th, right? Okay.
Can I make a suggestion for the next workshop of this? This conversation's gone on for quite a while. In recent memory, I think we really only have talked about dimensions, but we need to talk about fees, and I think some of us want to have an affordable housing requirement as a part of this. And that's something that I heard from all 4 of the 4 folks who spoke in the public hearing, which is this is not a affordable housing solution. And I agree with them. It's not an affordable housing solution unless we state plainly that it is an affordable housing solution. So I think we should go through the law and just say, like, here are the things that we, maybe just kind of go around and see how everybody feels about the different sections of the law, because I feel like whenever we have a conversation, we touch on a little area and they say, we'll come back to the whole, we'll come back to the rest of it. We really haven't done that in a while. And I think there's misgivings on the council about some of the parts of the law that aren't pertaining to dimensions.
Okay. Any other comments? So I will add only one. My parents were Greek immigrants. They immigrated to Detroit, and then we moved to California. My parents couldn't afford to buy a house in Southern California. What we did instead was on a roughly 50 by 100 foot lot, got help to purchase a 7-unit apartment house and lived in one of them and rented out the other 6 in order to afford the mortgage. So if you want to talk about affordability, we have to talk both about renters and owners, because people can't afford to buy a place. We certainly could not without having it be a multifamily. And that was the only option we had, and it made a difference for us. So I just want to add that to the discussion, which we can certainly take up on the 12th. Any other comments? Okay. Let's do reports. And let's start on the left. Justice, you want to start up and we'll go around? Thanks.
Okay. Yeah, the IM Beacon is having their back to school block party this Saturday, August 20th. It is from 12 to 4 at South Avenue Park. I hope to see folks there out and supporting. I certainly look forward to it. Let's see. I don't have office hours this month, or at least as of right now, but you can schedule an appointment with me anytime, pretty much, that I'm available at my website. It's linktr.ee/Justice McCrae, and there are a bunch of helpful links on there, including links to get monkeypox vaccinations either in Dutchess County, which in this case you would get a call from the health department and they would let you know as soon as monkeypox vaccinations are available in Dutchess County, or there's a link to vaccination appointments in Westchester County as well. But if you want to just go directly to Dutchess County's website for that too, you can go to dutchess.ny.us/health and see if you are eligible for a monkeypox vaccine. And that is all I have.
I just have one thing. I believe the council all received an email from some residents in the 3rd Ward near Grove Street about a subdivision that they had concerns with, and they were asking for a rezoning of that area, but I believe this project is currently before the planning board. But I was wondering, and I don't think it could be rezoned and in time enough for the to help this project, but I think in the future what we should look at, and maybe John Clark could have some input on this, is if we could have sort of a higher standard of scrutiny for subdivisions in existing neighborhoods, especially subdivisions of more than dividing a property in half, but certainly these where 5 or 6 units might be going into a place that has never known that property to be developed in the past. So I would ask if we could have that discussion to see if we can have a zone, but if someone wants to subdivide a property, that might require a different standard that the zoning had. Does that make sense?
No, you would change the zoning, right? If you...
No, I mean, can you keep
Nick,
the zoning?
why don't you field this one?
I was going to say, Chris, if the zoning permits a lot to be developed and you have a 20,000 lot and you can build 4,000 square foot lots on it, then you can't create a different standard. I mean, I'll give it some more thought if you forward the emails you received. We can give some more thought. But you would really have to change the zoning, which would then make the existing lots non-conforming, which might be...
Yeah, no, I'm not, I'm trying to figure out a way to not rezone an area, but just add a level of scrutiny to a subdivision. We might have opportunities there, I'm not sure.
Yeah, but I mean, your planning board is reviewing it.
They are reviewing it, but they have, as of right, the ability in a certain zone to build what they want. And I'm not sure what the levels of scrutiny are when someone wants to subdivide, but they could subdivide it up into what the current zoning allows. I'm asking for possibly additional scrutiny and regulation over the ability to split up a property. I don't know if it's possible. That's why I'm asking.
I think
I don't think it is, given, because you have to treat all property the same, whether it's being developed or not developed. So I think for more thought.
And we're on reports right now, so
No, I know,
maybe
that's
what
what
we could do is discuss it in workshop, and Nick could figure out if there's a mechanism.
No,
for
that's
that.
what I'm asking
But
for.
it's
I'm not asking
becoming
for
a
the
workshop
discussion
right now.
Right, I don't want it to be. I just was asking a question.
Sorry,
I didn't
Mayor.
expect answers.
It's getting late.
All right. That's all I have.
I am just sharing that I also did not have office hours in the month of August. However, as always, anyone is welcome to reach out to me and schedule a time ad hoc. My email is pwake@beaconny.gov, and my phone number is 845-418-2452. Thanks.
On September the 17th from 12 to 1:30, we will hold a Ward 3 meeting at the First Presbyterian Church. Thanks so much to the congregation and Pastor Eric Simon there for hosting us after they serve their community meal, which goes until noon. The meeting will take place in the community room off of Leonard Street, but they're getting their floor replaced, so it could be in the actual church part. So that's it for me. Thanks, y'all.
All right. So first thing, I've seen on the side of the road recently, maybe in the last month, it looks like some kind of herbicide is being sprayed, probably on Japanese knotweed, but it has the reddish color that's distinct to glyphosate. And so I just wanted to check that the city of Beacon is not using glyphosate. We have a policy in place, thanks to former council member Amber Grant, that the city does not use glyphosate and instead uses some natural alternatives. And that would include not just roadsides, but I think there was some chatter on Facebook about it being at University Settlement as well. Second thing for me is, so the last couple of years I've shared things that I'd like to see in the budget after the budget came out. And so I'm not going to be here on September 6th, and I don't know when the mayor is going to present the budget, so I thought I would just lay out some of the things that I'm interested in seeing. One is putting aside money to speed up the open space inventory and whatever it would take to get the OSI completed in the next 12 months or in the next year. I'd like to see more funding for trees. I'd like to see a standing budget for sidewalks, which I think we might have already talked about. I would really love it if we could keep the pool open for longer hours and for no fee registration. I don't think we should have any obstacles to access to public facilities. In this case, I think that one of the problems with the number of hours, because the hours have been getting shorter and shorter every year since it first came out, it seems, I think that has something to do with the lifeguards and how many lifeguards we have. So perhaps we maybe just need to increase the pay for lifeguards or look at it in another way. And then lastly, you know, over the last couple of years, over the last, with Chris and with Anthony before him, I've heard of capacity issues being a limitation for council moving policy. And so I don't want to have a conversation about capacity next year. I think if there's areas where we don't have capacity to meet the demands of the city council, that I think we should address them. And I don't really know where they are, but one area that I believe we need to beef up capacity is our building department. And I don't want to propose anything specific because I'm not a building department expert, but it seems to me that there could be a lot more inspecting going on. I get things all the time about, you know, construction sites with their plastic blowing all over the street, or silt fences laying in the creek, or whatever it may be. I would just like to know that regular inspections are happening at all of the construction sites in town. And if I also have seen construction workers not wearing hard hats, so I don't know who enforces that in the city, but perhaps that would be the building department. I don't know, but I'll do a little research into building departments and their size and their tasks relative to the size of their city, and perhaps we can go from there. And then lastly, I'll be away for the rest of the month, so I will not be having office hours. I will be slow to respond to email. If you need emergency, if you need to hear from someone quickly, just please include your at-large council members and Chris on your email. Thanks.
I'll be quick. One, the Howland Center had its 150th anniversary. It was a great event. Also, a new veterans and first responders group, Guardian Revival, had an event on this Friday, which was one of their programs for mental health is companion animals, and they provided 2 dogs to 2 Air Force vets locally, which I thought was, again, a fine event. And then finally, I think you may have heard this, the dummy light is back where it is. And that's all I got. Chris, anything you want to add?
I just want to thank Mickey Manzi for doing such a terrific job in locating all of the pieces of the light, and thank Dave Way and Sean DeToro for doing a fabulous job putting it back. Okay.
Let's start up on local laws and resolutions. There are 8 items and, of course, the minutes. So let's start in on this. The first one is a resolution to reject bids for accessible curb ramps. Can I get a motion and a second?
Motion?
Second.
Okay, that's Paloma and Wren. And if you recall, the two bids came back at $86,000 and $98,000, and our engineers thought it should be half that. So, any other comments? All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Okay. The second one is authorizing the implementation and funding of Fishkill Avenue reconstruction. This piece, the Fishkill Avenue piece of Route 52 is $7.2 million in total, and we are in effect guaranteeing that if the federal or the funding doesn't come through, we will pay for it, right? And this is a resolution to the state.
We would meet and discuss it first,
Yeah.
but yes.
Right. But the total now is 7.2?
Yes.
Okay. I need a motion.
For Fishkill.
And a second for Fishkill Ave?
Motion.
Second.
That's George and Dan. Any discussion?
Just excited it's moving forward.
Yep. All right, so all in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Okay. The next one is the other piece, which is the Teller Avenue piece. This was split up. This one is, totals $2.6 million, and can I get a motion and a second to authorize that?
Motion. Second.
It sounded like Justice and Dan. Okay. Any discussion? All right, so the two together are 9.8. This one's 2.6. All in favor?
Aye.
And anyone opposed? And just to confirm, when we're done, of the 9.8, the city's portion is?
Is about 500,000.
Okay.
But we think we can use our state touring routes dollars for that,
To bring it to
too.
zero?
I'm trying.
Yeah. Okay.
I'm trying.
So-
And these will be bid together, even though they're separate projects in terms of their identifier, they go together.
Right, and we don't expect to be bonding for any of this?
No.
Okay. The fourth one is amendments to the operating budget, and can we do them all together? Let me just summarize them. There's one item for $10,000 for fireworks, which is being funded with a donation, so you've got to transfer funds. The second item is severance, totaling $92,000 for retirements, and that would be coming out of contingency, since we set aside funds for retirements into contingency. And then the other two items are both overtime, totaling $20,000, of which $12,500 is paid for, and the other $7,500 comes out of the general fund?
Contingency.
Contingency, sorry.
Which is in the general fund.
Okay.
These are all general fund items.
Sorry, I meant fund balance, but it's not that, it's coming out of contingency.
Correct, it was
All right.
budgeted.
Right, so can I get a motion and second on all of those together, unless Nick tells me I got to break them into parts?
No, it's
Motion.
one.
Okay.
Second.
All right, and I didn't hear the first.
Wren.
That's what I thought, okay, and Justice was the second. Everyone, any comments or discussion? All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Okay, the fifth one is referring the Beacon Lofts concept proposal to the planning board. And is it both referral to the planning board and asking them to do the seeker review, if I got that right? Nick?
That is correct, yes.
Okay, can I get a motion and a second on that?
Motion.
Second.
And I think that was Paloma and Dan?
Wren and
It was
Dan.
Wren and Dan, okay, thank you. Any discussion? All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Okay, the next one is setting a public hearing. So this is setting a hearing for September 19th to amend the city code regarding self-storage parking requirements. I need a motion and a second.
Motion.
So that's
Second.
Justice and Wren, okay. Any discussion? All right, all in favor?
Aye.
All right, anyone opposed? Okay. Next one is also setting a public hearing, which I believe is also for the 19th of September, and that's for a local law to amend the code regarding off-street parking adjacent to non-residential districts. Can I get a motion and a second?
Motion.
'Cause that was-
Second.
That was you. And George? Okay. Any discussion? All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? All right, and the 8th one is authorizing the city administrator to apply for DOE for a Water Infrastructure Improvement Act grant totaling up to 3.7?
It's going to be about 2.2 million.
2.2, I'm sorry.
2.2 to 2.3, somewhere in that neighborhood.
A grant of 2.2 to 2.3 million. Can I get a motion and a second?
Motion.
Second.
Okay, that was Justice and Paloma. All right, I'm getting used to the muffled sound. That's how I can tell now. Okay, any discussion? All right, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Okay, and now, of course, there's the approval of the minutes.
The dreaded moment.
Which is the minutes of August 1st, which is the immediately preceding council meeting. I'm looking for a motion and a second.
There's just something we took
Let me
off.
get a second.
Oh, sorry.
Second.
So George and Paloma. All right. Now, Ren, you have a comment.
Something we took off that was still on there, the green infrastructure discussion that we had today.
Mhm.
Is that on there?
We removed it from the
The-
agenda last time.
But we removed it from the workshop agenda.
Oh, so it
So
can stay.
it's
Okay.
on the workshop agenda as Fishkill Creek and Green Infrastructure, and it was
Mhm.
retitled.
Okay.
But we don't do minutes for the workshops.
Okay.
All right, but we still need a correction or an addition or a typo. Nothing?
Should we take it off so that we know we didn't talk about it then? Doesn't matter.
No.
Oh, no, I'm sorry.
No,
We need
Lee's
another-
trying to make it so that we
Got it.
goofed up something, but I think we got this one.
All right. There's
Ben
no
told me-
Easter eggs in there?
No, Ben told me we had this.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Anyone opposed? All right, second opportunity for public comments. If you haven't spoken at the first opportunity for public comments and would like to do so now, there is 3 minutes for that. Is there anyone online, Ben, who'd like that opportunity?
There is nobody online.
I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion.
George?
Second.
Paloma? All in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Thank you all.
All right.
Recall,